We are talking SOULKEEPER. This one directed and written by Darin Ferriola, and it's a 2001 movie, although it feels like it should really have come out in the 80s. Arguably, I could say you could sit this along with the likes of Ghostbusters and Monsters, sort of those kind of like horror comedies, although I would say this is more like Porky's meets Scooby-Doo. So the story focuses on these two thieves, Corey and Terence, and they are kind of a somewhat of down on their luck. They are run out of money, but they are hired by a mysterious new client, played by genre favourite Brad Dourif, to steal a amulet. And this amulet is the Stone of Lazarus, and as legend has it, has the power to resurrect. And of course they don't initially believe this, when they go on this elaborate kind of heist mission, ultimately they discover that there may well be supernatural forces at work, including the Antichrist. What will happen? You'll have to watch the movie to find out. So let's first of all talk about what works with SOULKEEPER. So a somewhat obviously light tongue-in-cheek horror comedy that is quite a lot on the kind of the comedy side. Lots of kind of slapstick gags. It has a somewhat kind of cheesy feel to it that kind of will appeal to some people but not others. Like I said, this really kind of fits. It's kind of like a Porky's movie, really. There's lots of kind of like sexual references and gags and things like this. Probably more so leaning into comedy, more so than, like I say, Ghostbusters as a monster squad, like I've mentioned. But nonetheless, there are some kind of funny moments here, and our duo of protagonists are extremely kind of likeable and kind of quite fun guys, to be honest with you. And they go through kind of quite a lot of kind of hijinks, and there is some kind of quite amusing set pieces. There's also kind of quite a reasonable amount of practical effects on display here with kind of monster makeup, and there is some genuinely kind of quite interesting kind of like sequences within the movie. For example, when towards the finale of the film, they have a kind of the final attempt to get this kind of the Lazarus stone from Magus, who is our bad guy, and we see one of these guys climb up through a window, and he sort of sees like a woman looking in the mirror. And the reflection is kind of the sequence is made to look like a skull, and as he gets nearer, he sees it's actually like a woman looking in this kind of like this mirror. It's a very well done scene, but there are a few sequences like that where I feel it's actually quite good in regards to some of the kind of the shot composition and cinematography in regards to kind of some sequences, at least anyway. There's lots of attractive ladies in this. This is very much like, as I say, a feeling of the 80s. That hasn't really kind of had the modern sensibilities caught up to it at this point. And it really does feel like it's a kind of an 80s sort of style film. And there's, it's quite an intriguing kind of like mystery. Lots of kind of like familiar faces, as I've mentioned. You've got Brad Dourif, you've got Robert Davi in here, you've got Tony Lister as well. So there's a few kind of genre faces that will pop up here and there, and the actual story itself is reasonably kind of interesting. Maybe what doesn't work with this film, I feel this movie feels like a series of fetch quests, to be honest, and ultimately becomes a little bit slow for its own good. And although there are some fun sequences involving some amusing kind of like hijinks, or be they comedy or kind of horror, it does drag a little bit, to be honest. It ends up being fairly kind of like periods of just people talking in a room, from punctuated by smaller sequences where things actually happen. I think the whole sheen of the movie feels quite cheap. For example, some of the kind of the set design here is particularly kind of like wonky. There's a scene, for example, they're in a graveyard towards the beginning of their adventure, and they run out of it, and you see all the stones like wobble and stuff as they kind of are running around. So some of the kind of like the attention to detail is a little lacking, and it's just lots of kind of like dry ice fog machines and things like this. It looks quite kind of cheap and tacky by today's standards. And bear in mind, this was a 2001 movie. Although it feels like an 80s movie, it actually wasn't. Although some of the practical effects are quite good, obviously this is kind of like the dawn of when people started having CGI more in their films, and there is a little bit of ropey kind of CGI. Some of the comedy doesn't really work, I have to say. There are some sort of jokes here that just seem a little bit flat and a little bit juvenile. There's not a huge amount of kind of actual horror in it, to be quite honest with you. And it has a sort of like a weird cartoonish feel to it. Some of the transitions almost feel like you're watching kind of like a Looney Tunes cartoon in a certain way. I actually watched this, obviously, more when it came out, and I can remember quite enjoying it. Having rewatched it, I have to say I enjoyed it a little less. I still think there are some fun elements in here, and if you are a fan of horror comedy, it's by nowhere near the kind of the classic status as like Ghostbusters and things like that. But I would say it's still, if you like those sort of style films, it's certainly not as iconic, but it's still enjoyable enough for a kind of a B-movie version of those type of things. And like I said, there are some good moments within it, but I feel the movie as a whole, it is a little kind of like patchy. I'll give this one a 5 out of 10. Have you seen it? What did you think of it? Leave me a comment and I'll look forward to seeing you next time. Bye for now.